The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cara. I'm the artistic director at Milwaukee Film, and I'm really thrilled to welcome all of you out there on the internet to this afternoon's Q&A with Loira Limbal, the director of Through the Night. I'm going to have Loira join me up here on screen. And I'm going to kick us off with a number of questions, but if y'all have questions or comments that you want to send to us, feel free to do so in the chat function wherever you're at, and I will thread those into our conversation as we go. So, Loira, welcome to Milwaukee, virtually.
Thank you, Cara.
I want to start with kind of what I feel is always my opening question in Q&As, but really sort of how did you encounter Nunu and Patrick and the center and this story, and sort of what prompted you to make this film and tell this story?
Sure. So I actually learned about Nunu and Patrick's daycare through an article that I read, which was shared on an online mothers group that I'm a part of. I am a mother myself. I have 2 young children. And when I read the article, the focus of the article was really around the fact that so many people now in the US, I think it's about like 1.25 folks in the US now have to work more than one job. And not only are people working multiple jobs, but even if they're only working one, they're working non-standard hours, overnight shifts, just really irregular schedules. And that trend seems to be on the uptick, that it seems like we're not kind of going back to standard 9 to 5 or, those kinds of schedules. Those days are long gone. And so with that being the reality, the question that the article was looking at was who cares for people's children when they're working irregular shifts that change day to day or overnight shifts. And so that was the article. And when I read some of the stories that they profiled, some of the people that they profiled in the article, it automatically reminded me of my own childhood because my mother worked the night shift when I was growing up. She worked as a home health aide. So she was a caregiver herself that worked from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And I'm the oldest of 4 girls. So I did a lot of caregiving myself. I was often the babysitter and, just had kind of like a real view into how much she was juggling and how difficult the balancing act was for her. And so reading the article kind of brought me right back to my childhood and my mother, and, made me also think about some of my own experiences as a single working mother. And I just thought like, wow, this would make a great film.
So you just showed up, knocked on the door, and you're like, hello, I'm here to make your film. Tell me a little bit about
how do
definitely. You convince them to let you, document the beautiful chaos. Tell sort of how did that kind of come to be, and were there challenges kind of gaining that trust?
Sure. So I actually reached out to someone who had worked on the article to ask if they could make an introduction. Mm-hmm. And the person actually declined to do that. They said that they didn't think that the folks at the daycare would be open to it. And so I said, okay, well, I tried, and I kind of let it go, or I thought I was letting it go. And it took me about 2 years to actually cold call Nunu and Patrick. And the only reason I did was because I every so often would think about the stories or would be prompted to think about something around my childhood or my mother's story. And every time I had the thoughts, it just kind of kept coming back to this idea that the stories you see in Through the Night are very much the everyday reality for a lot of working class women of color, certainly Black and Latinx women. Yet we don't see these stories anywhere. So in thinking of my mother, who's now in her mid-60s, like knowing that she really hasn't in her whole life seen a story that fully represented her life experience, and just kind of being angered about that, that we don't, certain folks in this country do not get the benefit of seeing themselves mirrored anywhere, or their stories represented anywhere with kind of nuance and dignity and complexity. And so that kind of kept building my resolve, and then literally 2 years into this internal dialogue, I cold called the daycare, and I spoke with Nunu. I introduced myself. I said, this is who I am. This is what I do. I would like to make a documentary film with you all, and this is why I would like to do it. And so she said, okay, well, let me talk to my husband, and I'll get back to you. And she called me a few days later and asked me to come up to meet with them. And I did. And, we spent a few hours talking. And, it's funny because I like to share this little tidbit, because by the end, I had said numerous times, like, I understand that I would be filming people's children, which is very sensitive and very delicate. And as a parent, like, I understand that, and I appreciate, that sensitivity. And so I will absolutely respect any limits or any parameters that you all need to set in order to ensure that everyone feels safe and comfortable in this process. And by the end of the conversation, Nunu, who, if you've seen the film, you would know is like super warm and just like this amazing charismatic person. She kind of looked at me and she was like, baby, I'm looking in your eyes. I know who you are. You shared some of your life story with me. I'm not worried. So you tell me what you need and we'll just make it happen. Okay. And it was a good lesson for me, because I did spend 2 years in doubt, and kind of, I was also trying to talk myself out of the idea of making a film, because I have a full-time job and I have 2 kids. And so I was kind of telling myself, like, you have no business trying to be in production right now. That would be too much. But it was just this kind of idea and this need to tell this story that I couldn't talk myself out of.
And that's so... that's the exact spirit that I think Nunu brings to like every situation of like, oh, you need a different piece of food. Okay, let's solve it. Like, what do you need? Let's get it. Let's solve it. Let's figure it out. Let's get it done. Let's do it together, right? And that feels all like the fact that bleeds over into, all right, so you want to make a film? Okay, let's just do it. Were all of the families that, of course, you had to seek permission from, like, as receptive? Were there any sort of, you anticipated some challenges, it sounds like, in terms of like, this might be complicated. Did those bear out at all?
I know, I certainly did. I anticipated many challenges, and for the most part, they didn't. And I would say that really is due to Nunu and Patrick and the relationships that they've built with the families, right? And so the trust that families have in them, I think I benefited from, because Nunu basically, said, I trust her. And this is something we're doing together. And we had lots of conversations. It was a really kind of open-ended. I tried to be as transparent as possible with them along the way of, what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it, what the potential outcomes could be. I took it really seriously, because, obviously anytime people open their lives up to you, you have a responsibility, you're accountable to them. And certainly in this instance, dealing with children, adds just another layer of accountability to that process.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think I'm going to say, as a viewer, you know, it feels like you bore that trust well, right? You took care of the, you know, the subjects of the camera, those in front of the camera, as much as they were sort of trusting in you to do so. You know,
Thank you.
I feel that you feel that through the lens. That's weird to say, but like that same trust and like care overall feels like it carries behind the camera as well, and into the edit and different, you know, sort of the different pieces of filmmaking where those choices are still kind of there, right? Like how do I hold this person sort of human and show them, but also you know, kind of hold them up. I think it's there, definitely. Were there surprises? You know, you sort of were like, okay, I want to tell the story that you felt a lot of like kinship to, with these experiences and these humans who are having these experiences that felt familiar or related to your own. Were there things that surprised you in the course of filming? How long did you film for?
Over the course of 3 years, we shot.
So it took you 2 years to get there, and then 3. So we're building the long arm of filmmaking here. And so in those 3 years, what was maybe the most surprising thing to you that you discovered, either thematically or the surprises of documentary filmmaking where real life happens? Any of those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that there certainly were a lot of surprises. One was, you know, one of, I think like maybe my second shoot was on the first day of school. And I chose that day because again, as a parent, I know that like the return to school and new routines and new schedules is always really kind of complicated and sometimes chaotic, but also can really, you know, kind of brings to the fore all of the main issues in the lives of working parents, right? Because it's this juggle, and there's these like key moments, right, throughout the year. And I figured first day of school has been that for me. So I chose to film that day because I was expecting that there would be some tension or just, you know, things that could be really kind of emblematic, right, of the lives of working mothers. And we were there for like a really long day, and all kinds of things did happen. But one thing that really shocked me was there was never a kid like crying, clinging to their mother at the door. I swore that we would get a shot of, you know, some child who did not want to detach from their mother's neck, you know, and that never happened. And that was my second shoot. And I think that's when I realized like this daycare, you know, and Nunu and Patrick and what they have going here is truly amazing. You know, and I'll say we spent long days, you know, because we would often go thinking we want to try to get the routine and get all the different cycles, you know, and everything. And we would, you know, spend 12, sometimes 14 hours at the daycare. It's also a verite film, so we needed to be there, right?
Right.
And there was never like any moments of discord, you know, within the daycare with that many children, you know, different children, different ages, coming from different homes, different life situations. And I'm not saying this to say that that no one has any problems, right? Like they're human, they have all the same kind of problems that anybody else has, but somehow within the walls of that daycare there is a magic that I, you know, it's really just I have to say, and to just be real and honest, but also like to lift up Nuno and Patrick and how amazing and special they are as people and what they do. So I think that was like my biggest surprise.
Yeah.
I just never got like the chaos. Like there was really never, it was busy, right? And there's like this kind of elaborate, intricate dance, but it's this like well choreographed ballet that never like falls apart, you know. And that was surprising to me. Yeah, and you know, and then I would say personally, there were things that either Nunu or Marisol or Shanona shared with me that certainly made me rethink some things in my own life. You know, there was a way in which I think at times witnessing their journeys as working single mothers was a mirror for me
Hmm.
in ways that I had not completely expected. So there was this like process of like personal revelation for me that I'm really grateful to them for.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm I'm remembering moments. I'm wondering, I feel like snacks is an important piece of the magic.
Yes.
Feeding people usually helps. I don't know. And then just sort of thinking about like there's sort of a control, but it's a flexible control. It's like, well, here's
Hmm.
the boundaries, but then within that, there's a lot of space
Yeah.
for the kids to be themselves, right? I feel like
Yeah.
those are at least two pieces of the magic, but then I think there's some things that are like untenable, hard to
Yeah.
recreate probably, that are personality based. So your film is showing in the context of the Minority Health Film Festival, which is taking kind of a broader definition of health than just, kind of like medical diagnoses and that kind of thing. I'm wondering whether you could talk a little bit about how you see your film and its sort of exploration of kind of the expansive community of defining care, redefining care, and sort of thinking about how we raise children in community or not as a health issue.
Yes. Oh, I love it, and that's one of the reasons we were super excited to participate in this festival. Because I think, you know, what the moment of the pandemic, this COVID-19 moment, has really illustrated in new and deeper ways than ever before is how important caregiving work is, whether you're thinking about it from the perspective of, you know, nurses and doctors, right, who didn't have access to PPE, or, you know, who are overworked or undervalued, or, you know, whatever the case may be, down to teachers, right, who we now, there's this conversation about like teachers are not care providers, but parents and people want them to go back because there's no childcare, and you know, this kind of conflation between education and care. But I would say like educating is care, right? It is a really critical part of nurturing, and I'm not trying to say that teachers should have to carry that weight and responsibility. I think the roles are different, and they're distinctive, and they're all necessary and equally valuable, which is the piece that I think we didn't understand before. That yes, nurses are important, yes, teachers are important, but you know what? So are home-based daycare providers. So are the home health aides, you know, who make oftentimes minimum wage or less than minimum wage, who are caring for our elderly population. So are those, you know, nurses, aides, and assistants at nursing homes, right? Like, there are all these people that are part of this care ecosystem that truly is the work that makes all other work possible. And within the context of communities of color, like, not just makes work possible, but actually keeps us alive um, in a world that literally is trying to kill us at every turn. You know, I think about the my own experiences, my mother's experiences, Marisol, Shanona, some of the other parents' experiences at the daycare, where, you know, if you are a Black woman, giving birth is already, you know, a hazard, right? And I've certainly had my, you know, fair share of situations where I felt like I was treated unfairly, and not provided with the care that I needed, and I definitely think it was due to medical racism. Um, so not just giving birth and bringing children into the world, right?
Mhm.
Then you have to contend with the educational system, where there's a lot of racism, right, and implicit bias, and in the way that your children are treated, and the way that you're treated as parents, what people think are your rights are not your rights, right? And so you're constantly like fighting them, you know, and it just kind of like, so basically like every part of like the state, every arm of the state, whether it's medical or education, all the way. By the time that like for me, I have, I'm a Black woman with 2 Black children. God forbid, may they never have an encounter, a violent encounter with police. But by the time that our children get there, they've already had they've been harmed in so many other ways. And so as mothers, we are also being harmed because we're the ones that then are fighting and advocating on top of us ourselves being harmed, right? And so it's like, these networks, in our communities of caregivers are the people that keep us alive in a society that is essentially set up to do the opposite, right? Is to take our lives away, is to not allow us to breathe. And connecting it back to Nunu and Patrick, I often talk about them as the safety net that the state should provide to folks of color and poor and working class folks, but does not. Mm-hmm. They are that safety net. It's an informal safety net, and they're taking on a responsibility that does not belong to them, but they take it on. And that is what happens in communities of color, is that it is through our care that we are able to survive and live in a hostile society, in a hostile environment. The catch, though, is that this actually, comes at a great expense to them, right? Because none of this work is valued properly. It's not respected, properly. And so, when we talk about essential workers and the context of care, like, yes, care is absolutely essential. But unfortunately, because most of the care work is done by Black and brown, women and femmes, the work is not valued. And so these people are not treated as essential. They're actually just sacrificial. We're asking them to sacrifice themselves and their families for the benefit of everyone else,
Yeah. And we see not a huge amount, but I think we see Nunu and Patrick kind of grapple with their placement within the economic system that is sort of setting them up to not succeed, or to be sort of crushed by trying to provide that true kind of net and care and that moment. And so that you definitely, I think, see that tension.
And it's like, you just even in the fact that, like, in the film, literally no one can sleep.
Right. Yes. Including your film crew.
Nunu and Patrick aren't sleeping because the mothers are not sleeping because they're working. And so they're caring for the kids. So, like, literally, like, something as basic. You want to talk about, like, basic human right? Sleep, rest, and in our economy, in this sort of late stage capitalism that we're in, sleep has become a luxury that only some are entitled to, which to me is like, that's a real problem. Yes. That's a real problem. And literally no one in the film gets a regular night's sleep. They can't because they're working around the clock.
Yeah. And that is definitely felt. One of the questions, when do they sleep? And then you realize, they kind of just don't. And so, like, early on, you're like, all right, I'm looking forward to figuring out, like, when do they sleep? What does that look like? Oh, wait, that's not going to happen. Then sort of this moment where you realize, that is the reality. And that's the whole, sort of the physical.
Right. And and that this, this way in which, it is at once admirable, right, that there are these amazing women in our communities who provide this and fulfill these roles, right, and take care of everyone. But it's also like I said earlier, the sacrifice that then we ask them to make, that we normalize and that we invisibilize, because we don't even see the sacrifice. But that sacrifice is Nunu never thinking to go to the doctor, right? Or never thinking that she could make the time to go to the doctor as she's having different kinds of symptoms, or not properly following up, trying to put things off because she's needed, and she is needed. She is not incorrect, but it's unjust. It's unfair for us to, and then the thing that angers me, and this is the piece where I wanted to, this is why it's like, why make a film? Because films make things visible, and I did want to create, a cinematic portrait and depiction of this. The fact that really, the piece that really angers me is just how comfortable we are, like, invisibilizing. It's kind of like completely like out of sight and out of mind. And so when we're interacting with our essential workers today, I think most people are not asking themselves, like, well, how is this woman doing things? Like, who's caring for her kids,
Right.
While I go to Target at 10 p.m. at night?
Right.
We kind of don't care, because it's just so normal, and it's become so expected that this is the role that certain people are supposed to play in our world, right? And this is just the state of things. And that's the thing I want to kind of, rub up against for people. It's like, none of this is normal,
Yeah. And I think part of the invisibilization, right, is this very American, or, capitalist probably, notion of like, well, that's on you. You're the individual. You'll figure it out. So we're able to say, like, well, you've got it figured out, I'm sure. And not having to think about sort of the reciprocity of being in community, even with strangers, of who is caring for this person, who is caring for me. What is
right. And that's the thing that COVID has made now clear, is that actually, like, that whole, it's on you, it's your problem. Guess what? That actually does not work like that, because as much as we want to think that that's the truth, we are interconnected. And you and key parts of your life are only possible because of this other person and this other person's labor. So you actually have to care, like, all of a sudden we're like, oh, it's like the CEO that can't, get their employees, to do what they need to do because their employees don't have childcare, or don't have whatever they need. And now all of a sudden the CEO is like, oh,
you have children. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm interested in, like, COVID updates, sort of how is the daycare center doing? I imagine, in my mind, not much has changed, but tell me if I'm wrong.
It's been a very wild ride. Everyone in the film is safe and healthy. None of them stopped working, because Shanona is a nurse, so she's an essential worker. Marisol works for a supermarket supply store, so she's an essential worker. And Nuno and Patrick were caring for the children of essential workers. So they never closed. They've worked throughout this whole time, but they are all on the front lines of this. So they have been under extreme stress and duress. And it's been really difficult, particularly for Nuno and Patrick, trying to figure out, the economic piece, because parents that could keep their children home did. And so numbers of enrollment went down, private pay, but then you can't, fire all your staff, because you want your staff to keep their jobs. And, and then also trying to support parents that were facing everything from housing, insecurity, to food insecurity, and everything in between. Like, the community's been really, really hard hit. As we know, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted Black and Brown communities. So that's very much the case. And again, Nuno and Patrick trying to kind of take care of everyone in that, and so they've been open, they're physically safe, super hard hit though, and are now trying to do virtual school for the kids that are attending their daycare. So now they have, like, God knows how many kids that are going to how many different schools and how many different grades. And now they are the virtual school teachers, So that's how they're doing.
But taking it in, I am also imagining taking it in that sort of like, all right, what do we need to do? Let's get it done. What do you need for this class at this school right now? Okay, let's. And I don't know. I in some ways I think that would be the ideal place to be doing your virtual school, because there's that flexible
Certainly.
structure.
Listen, I have definitely thought about like how can I get my kids
Send your kids.
at Nunu and and Pop Pop's daycare, because in the midst of everything that we're experiencing, there's probably no better place for anyone's child to be than their daycare center, for sure.
And some stability, right? In this moment of so much instability.
Yeah.
Unexpected instability for so many, and the same old instability for many as well.
Yeah.
We have some wonderful comments in the chat. People expressing appreciation. Some folks saying hello to you. I assume you may know Uncorked Uncultured, or maybe there's just a hello, and some appreciation for the sort of continued remembering of these essential workers that are kind of made invisible, and then a thank you from one of our programmers, Dante McFadden, who says that your film reminded him of his childhood spent at daycare centers. So some personal relationships to the story, sort of carrying that legacy kind of forward, as it were, through sharing these stories, through making visible this space that, you know, a lot of audiences wouldn't have the opportunity to witness. Even the parents who send their children there, I imagine, you know, learn something about what is this experience. I wonder how's that reaction been for, you know, the community of the center being able to sort of re-see themselves through the film.
Yeah, so unfortunately, because of COVID, we haven't had a communal viewing experience yet. The closest that I've gotten to being able to watch the film with folks at the daycare was sharing it with Nunu, Patrick, their children, a few of the children, Marisol, and, you know, it's like a smaller group. So we haven't been able to do like, you know, the goal, the vision was we were supposed to premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival in April. And because it's a New York festival, everyone from the daycare was going to come. You know, that was like, we were going to get like 2 big buses so that people didn't have to worry about parking or whatever. We're going to figure out childcare. So like everyone that wanted to could come and we could have this experience together. And then, you know, in New York, the spring was mayhem. So we were all just literally trying to survive. But for the people that have seen it, it's funny because when they watch it with each other, they kind of like notice things about themselves, but they also notice things about each other and kind of like make fun of each other. So there's lots of comments about Pop Pop and, you know, how funny he is in the film. And then, you know, more on the more serious side, it's been interesting because Nunu obviously has seen the film now several times. And the most recent thing that she said to me was, thank you for letting me see myself, which I was like, okay, if I do nothing else in my life, like that's it, I'm good. I'll rest on this laurel right here, you know, just to have done something that is affirming for a woman like Nunu, who has cared literally and affirmed so many of us and our families and our children. Like that's who I want to be giving back to, you know, and that's what I'm thinking of when I make my work. So it's been really interesting to see and the kids are fun. They're hilarious. They definitely are like, oh my God, you said that. Oh my God, you did that. Ha, 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 ha. You know?
I'm imagining these parents who were like, wait, you told me nothing happened that day. All of that happened. I'm just like imagining that, like, well, but it wasn't, I don't know, like this sort of view into this space that you know, like, don't this experience of somebody who, you know, that you get to see in a different kind of context. It feels really, and just that comment from Nunu. Ooh. Yeah, you hold on to that one. That's
that one for me is like, really was really profound
to be able to give her that kind of context experience. We have a question coming in from Heidi Moore, who is a Milwaukee Film Board member and an important instigator for the Minority Health Film Festival, asking how is Nunu doing health-wise?
So she's doing better. She has I think she says it in the film, that she was not expecting to be able to get everything back in terms of some of her sight and other things that were impacted. And that's still the case. So she, remains impacted in that way. But I will say she now is much more cautious about her health and really on top of her doctor's appointments. But she's doing well. And, like Cara said, figuring it all out and, acting like, I joke that I feel like Nunu's the Oracle in the Matrix, that like all seeing, all knowing, amazing Black woman, like that's Nunu in my mind. So she is still very much that in the film. And I hope, that in seeing herself, a piece of her experience, that she sees like how much she's deserving of care, and rest herself, whether that's from herself to herself or from others, around her, because she is completely essential, but she is not, I don't know, she's not to be sacrificed,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I hope that was a piece of her when she said, thank you for showing me, that she was able to sort of see herself as deserving of that same care from herself or from others, if she could find someone to trust, to take. And, unfortunately, health, sometimes your body will tell you now it is time, which I think is very familiar, for a lot of us, that sometimes your body will tell you, you need to take care of you now, and I'm just going to stop you.
Yeah. You hit a wall. It's like, well, you have plans.
You thought you were doing that?
Nope. Guess what? Yeah.
In the response to the film, which, sort of, the Tribeca was postponed. I don't know what they're calling it. Postponed. They're doing a fall something, right? They've moved their 2021 dates, but you have been sort of sharing the film at other festivals and virtually, and like, one, I'm interested in kind of like, how has that response been? How has that experience been for you as a filmmaker? And then sort of what may have motivated you to really kind of get this film kind of out into the world, virtually, kind of given these themes of sort of community, and what I'm imagining, all these beautiful communal screenings that aren't happening. What was that choice like for you, sort of in terms of thinking about your audience?
Yeah. So the first part of the question, the experience of sharing the film virtually has been disorienting, and I would say a little. I feel a little like alienated. Mm-hmm. It's hard to share a film this way, so I don't necessarily really know, how the film is landing.
Right.
You don't have, oftentimes most Q&As are pre-recorded. This, a live Q&A is like a real treat, these days. But, I don't know when people watch it. Sometimes people will tune into a Q&A, but they haven't seen the film, like they're just catching it on their Facebook, stream or whatever. So it's all very disorienting, that experience of like being in a theater, watching a film with people sitting in your emotions and then sharing with each other's emotions. That magic is really hard to recreate in the virtual world. So I would say that it's hard. It's certainly not fulfilling my filmmaker needs.
You're not going to become just all my films are just going to play virtually forever.
No. And at the same time, because the film does feel like it's so timely, I felt like we had to use whatever little bit of a platform that a film provides to support, both the communities literally in the film, but other care providers, and to kind of create a space, like a virtual mirror, if you will, for other single working mothers, whether they're essential workers or not, to have some, something, some community, some space that is that is treating like their experiences with some care. Again, back to this thing of care, and so it just felt like we couldn't hold back, and it also, like, I don't know, hold back for what? We don't know what's coming.
Right.
So it was also like we could be in an indefinite holding pattern. I know people are like, you could wait till theaters open or festivals come back or this, that, or the third. I really don't know, what's gonna happen, and none of us do. So it just felt like we had to get it out for all the reasons that I just shared.
And I mean, starting these conversations, right? Being able to, start the conversation and, kind of keep it moving and keep it going. I think I'm grateful that you sort of chose not to sort of like hold on to it, because it does feel like, although you did not intend to make a film about 2020 and all of these new things, it feels like part of making visible so many of these structural inefficiencies that have kind of been ignored for too long, that, all of the things that are happening this year are also elevating into sight. Yeah. I think your film contributes to that, and contributes something that's not, I'm going to say, like, dismal, but that has a hopefulness, right? Like, to see, like, this is doable. This is a thing. There's a relatable, empathy, human experience that I can say, oh, like, if each relationship had this kind of flexible openness, this empathetic sort of open, perhaps there's a hope at the end of that for us.
So no, for sure.
That you've chosen to kind of let it start those conversations, let it start those internal and external conversations. Everyone is only sending you wonderful comments, including people who haven't yet had the chance to see the film, which I will say is showing through Thursday at mkefilm.org/MHFF to locate the film and see it. It's only available in Wisconsin, so hopefully you're in Wisconsin if you're wanting to still catch it. Thank you so much for making time for Milwaukee today. We will try to keep you posted. This will be put on our YouTube page, so maybe more comments and more audience feedback and interaction will be made available to you. But thank you so much, Loira, for being here with us and for your wonderful, beautiful film.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much. And thank you for having the film and for having a live Q&A. Again, a real treat these days. Really, really appreciate it. And I love the framework of looking at health, in a really broad, from a broad perspective. I think that is definitely, if we learn nothing else from COVID-19, that's probably the biggest lesson for all of us.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF